I made the same drive dozens of times, same route, same playlist, same half-empty bottle of gas station coffee rolling around in the passenger side cup holder. The road from my mom's place back to the city is straight enough to do with your eyes closed, though I'd never test that theory. Still, tonight felt different. It was close to midnight when I pulled onto the main stretch of highway. One of those clear-skied summer nights where the moon paints everything with a pale silver light. The temperature outside was just right, not warm enough to need AC, not cool enough to fog the windows. The kind of quiet that should be calming. Should be. Instead, the silence pressed in. Heavy, thick, not the peaceful kind of quiet that settles on you when you're alone, but the kind that hums behind your ears and makes you glance at the back seat every few minutes, just to be sure. I'd barely gone a few miles before I noticed the GPS glitch. The screen flickered for a second, then the familiar voice calmly declared it was recalculating. That would have made sense if I'd taken a wrong turn, but I hadn't. I knew this road like muscle memory. Straight for 20 minutes, then a bend near the old drive-in theater that was now just a collapse sign and a skeleton of a screen. But there it was, recalculating. No explanation, just a spinning blue wheel and a new ETA blinking at the top of the screen. I gave it a glance and muttered something under my breath. Something dismissive, something tired. Maybe it just lost signal. Happens in the more rural stretches. Then I looked up into the rearview mirror. I don't know what made me check it. Habit, probably, but the moment I did, something tugged at the inside of my chest. The kind of small, sharp feeling that doesn't fully register at first. The kind you get when you know something's off, but can't say what. It took me a few seconds to realize it was the trees. They looked wrong. On either side of the road behind me, the trees had gone completely bare. Dozens of them. Thin, knotted branches like skeletal arms twisting toward the sky. I blinked, glanced at the side windows, normal. Summer green, leaves rustling softly in the breeze. Looked back at the mirror, dead. Hollow. I shook my head. Probably just an illusion. Maybe I passed through a grove of ash trees. Or maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. Headlights can warp things, especially when you're tired. The brain fills in the blanks. Still, I kept glancing back. Every few miles. Couldn't help it. At one point, I passed a billboard. Nothing unusual. Just an ad for a local gun shop with the usual patriotic imagery. 10 seconds later, I looked into the mirror again, and the billboard was gone. Not obscured or collapsed. Gone. As if it had never been there. A familiar ripple of unease started working its way up my spine. I turned down the radio, just in case it was contributing to the weird sense of disconnection. The silence that filled the car was immediate, total. Even the tires seemed quieter on the road. I rolled the window down for some fresh air, but the breeze that met me was oddly still. Not warm, not cold, just still, like a breath being held. The yellow dash lines on the road started to blur. At first, I thought it was just the high beams playing tricks. But the longer I stared, the more they seemed to pulse in the mirror. Flickering faintly, almost like they were blinking out for a fraction of a second and reappearing somewhere else. I stopped looking at the mirror then. Not out of choice, really out of instinct. My stomach tightened every time my eyes wandered up toward it. It was like touching a cold doorknob in a dark basement. You do it because you're supposed to, but your whole body resists. But not looking didn't help either. The air in the car had changed. Not the temperature, not the smell, just the quality. Like I'd driven through some invisible threshold, and everything behind me was no longer part of the same world. Even the GPS went quiet. No more rerouting. Just a single screen with the road extending forward and a tiny car icon that didn't seem to be moving. As if I was standing still, even though the speedometer showed 65. I told myself to pull over. I even reached toward the turn signal, but the road had narrowed. No shoulder, no exit, no mile markers. Nothing but unbroken highway stretching ahead and behind. My hand stayed on the wheel. My eyes drifted to the mirror again. This time, there were no trees at all. Just open, empty space. A flat grayness that looked like mist, but didn't move like it. A kind of static fog. The sky behind me was darker than it should have been. Too dark for a moonlit night. That was the moment I realized something else. I hadn't seen another car for over half an hour. No headlights in the distance. No taillights ahead. Not even a truck pulled over on the side. Nothing. Just me, the endless road, and whatever version of it existed in the mirror. I told myself it was fine. Rural highways get quiet after midnight. But the part of my brain that handles reason wasn't in charge anymore. The part in charge now was older, deeper. The part that doesn't need proof to know danger. The part that tells animals to freeze when they sense eyes on them in the dark. Because that's exactly what it felt like I was being watched. Not from the woods, not from behind a tree, but from inside the reflection. Somewhere just out of view, just beyond what the mirror could show. Something waiting to step fully into frame. Something that knew the exact moment I'd look again. And I knew I would, no matter how hard I tried not to. Fiddled with the radio, first, searching for something, music, talk, anything to ground me in something ordinary. Static. Every station. No distortion, no distant voices. Just a low, dry hiss that rose and fell like breathing. I turned it off after a few minutes. That sound had a way of getting into your skull. Then the phone. Nothing. No bars. No signal. Just the emergency call screen and the mocking little icon of a satellite, as if it were searching for something that simply wasn't there anymore. I gave a minute. Tried to focus on the road, on the darkness ahead. Tried to tell myself again that I was just tired, maybe dehydrated, maybe pushing too hard after a long day. But that didn't explain why the world felt like it was slipping out of sync. Like a record just slightly off-center, rotating with a low wobble that only grows more noticeable the longer it plays. My eyes drifted up again, almost involuntarily. The mirror showed a different sky now. Not black, not even dark blue, but a lifeless slate gray like the color of old paper. Flat, pale, stripped of any depth or motion. And the trees were no longer just leafless. They were skeletal, brittle, frozen mid-sway like they'd been snapped still by some unseen force. The yellow lines on the road behind had disappeared completely. Just solid, featureless blacktop trailing off into the distance. It reminded me of a blank canvas, waiting for something to be painted on it. Something that hadn't yet revealed itself. Ahead of me, things still looked normal, for the most part, but then the exits started disappearing. I was sure I'd passed the same green sign for a rest area at least twice before I noticed it was gone entirely. There were no mile markers anymore, no reflector posts, no overhead lights. Only my headlights carving out a narrow cone of visibility, and beyond that, nothing. Not dark, just nothing. The highway had begun to change shape. It was subtle at first, a slight dip here, a sharper turn there, but after 20 minutes, I realized I was no longer on the same stretch of road. The shoulder had narrowed. The terrain on either side had leveled out, flattening into an empty field of dark soil. It looked recently plowed, but abandoned, like no one had ever planted anything in it. The creeping dread I'd been trying to suppress now wrapped around my chest like a belt tightening notch by notch. It was in that moment, when the world outside stopped offering even the illusion of comfort, that I saw something move in the mirror. Just a flicker, something low to the ground, skimming along the edge of the highway in the rear view. I blinked, leaned closer, but it was gone. Nothing there but the same bare trees and that unending strip of road. Then it moved again, far off, almost at the horizon of the mirror's reach. Something was running. At first, it looked like a dog, four-legged, lean, but it was too tall. Then it dropped low, moved differently. 2 legs, not 4, or maybe both. It darted with a kind of animal grace, but stopped and shifted weight like a person. I stared, breath caught somewhere between my lungs and my throat. It was too far back to see clearly, just a shape in motion, darker than the background, but unmistakably real and gaining. I turned in my seat, twisted to look out the rear window. Empty. The stretch behind me showed nothing but rolling highway and the quiet thrum of taillights on cracked asphalt. But the mirror told another story. The shape had halved the distance in seconds. I pressed the gas. Hard. The engine didn't roar so much as growl. The car responded, thank God, and I felt the surge of acceleration pull me forward. The wheels gripped the road, the body vibrated with speed, and for a few moments, the only thing I could hear was the wind outside screaming against the frame. But the mirror wouldn't let me go. The shape was still there, and closer. No matter how fast I went, it kept pace. Or maybe it wasn't moving faster. Maybe the road behind me was shrinking, folding in on itself, like a tunnel collapsing. And something happened that snapped whatever hope I had left. The world outside began to match the mirror. I didn't see it all at once. I caught it in fragments, details at the edge of vision. A tree leaning at an impossible angle, a match for one I'd seen 10 minutes ago in the mirror. A crack in the road splitting a perfect Y shape. The strange, pale quality of the moonless sky beginning to leach into the real one. The mirror had stopped showing something behind me. It was showing what was coming. Everything I passed, I had already seen seconds, minutes earlier in the reflection. The trees, the shoulder, the peculiar bends in the road. Even the color of the sky. All of it had shown up in the mirror first. As if the reflection had become a preview of the world ahead, rather than a record of what was left behind. I didn't know which world was real anymore. I felt like I was watching two versions of the same road overlapping, one alive, one hollow, and the hollow one was swallowing the other. And still behind me, the shape ran, not in the headlights, not in the real world, only in the mirror, but gaining with every breath. I no longer cared whether I was imagining it or not. I didn't need proof. Some part of me, the part that still remembered what fear really felt like, the kind that couldn't be explained away by exhaustion or coincidence, knew this wasn't just a trick of light or sleep deprivation. Something had stepped into the reflection, and now the road ahead belonged to it. The gas gauge dropped like a stone. That was the first thing that shook me back into the body. 1 second it hovered above half, and the next it teetered just above empty. No warning, no steady descent, just a sudden, silent plunge. I stared at it, waiting for the needle to bounce back, hoping, somehow, that it was just another glitch. But it stayed there, still, mocking. I knew I'd filled up earlier that evening. I remembered the pump, the smell, the beep of the card reader. I even remembered the small receipt flapping on the dash. But all of that meant nothing now. The tank said it was dry, and I didn't want to find out what this highway would do if I ran out of gas. I scanned the horizon, and that's when I saw it. A small glow in the distance. Soft orange, flickering slightly. Not headlights, something stationary. A sign, rectangular and humming faintly. It took a full minute before the building came into view. An old gas station tucked into a patch of trees like it had been forgotten on purpose. It looked abandoned from a distance, and it looked worse up close. The pavement in front of the pumps was cracked and buckled, weeds poking through the gaps. The roof overhang sagged slightly to one side, and a single fluorescent light above the door buzzed with a strange rhythm, almost like a pulse. One of the letters on the glowing sign was missing, leaving a single blinking syllable that meant nothing. The windows were streaked with grime. The pumps looked like relics from a forgotten decade. I pulled up beside one anyway. No choice. I killed the engine and stepped out, the cool air hitting me like a question I couldn't answer. The silence here was different. It wasn't the heavy stillness of the road. It was hollow, as if sound had been scraped clean from the air, leaving only the faint hum of old electricity and a crunch of gravel underfoot. Inside the building, the lights flickered. Dust hung in the air like cobwebs mid-fall. The shelves were mostly empty, just a few cans with labels long faded. A single clock hung crooked behind the counter. It wasn't ticking. I wandered through the aisles, calling out instinctively, though I already knew I wouldn't find anyone. The place smelled like mildew and something metallic, something old. The air was dry, almost sandy, like I was walking through the ghost of a memory someone else had abandoned. There were no mirrors. That detail struck me slowly, like noticing a missing tooth. I checked the corners, the restrooms, the narrow hallway near the back. Not a single reflective surface. Even the soap dispenser above the rust-stained sink had been scraped clean of anything that could shine. That absence, it felt intentional. As I turned to leave, a glint caught my eye. Something small, lying just outside the doorway near the edge of the pump island. A compact mirror, round, scratched, the kind you might find in someone's purse or glove compartment. I picked it up, hand trembling without permission. The reflection inside was warped from the wear, smudged, but clear enough to show the station behind me. and something else. A shadow, tall, broad-shouldered, half-formed in the haze, standing between two pumps where no one had stood a moment before. I froze, muscles locking without order. I didn't breathe. Then I turned. Nothing. Just the cracked pavement, the pumps, the empty stretch of highway to the left and right. No figure. No movement. Not even wind. I backed into the car, hands shaking as I stuffed the mirror into the glove compartment. The engine didn't respond when I turned the key. Nothing but a hollow click. I tried again. Click. The third time, I held my breath. The engine roared to life like it had never stopped. But everything around me had changed. In the rear view, the gas station was no longer dim and dusty. It was destroyed. Boarded up windows. Glass shattered in the doorway. One of the pumps missing entirely. The roof half collapsed, swallowed by moss and vine. The glow from the sign was gone. Only a black rectangle hanging by frayed cables. None of that matched the world outside the windshield. Forward, the station still stood. Backward, it was a ruin. And then something tapped the window. Soft, deliberate, like a single fingertip on glass. I turned to look. No one there. I scanned the side mirror. The rear view. The shadows between the pumps. Nothing. But my pulse was thundering now. Loud enough to drown out the engine. Loud enough to make me forget I hadn't blinked in nearly a minute. The car idled in place, headlights cutting into the night that had no color, no shape. I reached for the gear shift, paused, then looked one last time at the mirror. Two sets of footprints now trailed behind the car. Fresh, deep in the gravel. One pair led up from the highway to where I stood. The second set, narrower, less confident, led in, stopped at the driver's side door, and vanished. No return path, no exit, only a second set of tracks that ended right beside me. I didn't wait to understand. I shifted into drive and pressed the gas. The wheels hesitated for a split second, just long enough to make me think I wouldn't escape. And then the car surged forward, tires screaming briefly against the uneven concrete before catching traction. The station disappeared in the rear view like it had never existed. But the track stayed, etched in the reflection, deep, frozen in place like a warning carved into stone. The tires chewed through mile after mile, but the road offered no comfort. The gas station slipped behind me like smoke through fingers, and the highway twisted into something that didn't feel like it belonged to the world I left behind. It no longer moved straight. Curves formed where there should have been none. Angles sharpened unnaturally, banking like a roller coaster with no warning. The pavement itself seemed uneven, warping gently under the tires like a ripple frozen in tar. Familiarity was gone, completely. No rest stops, no markers, no lights. The moon had vanished somewhere behind the clouded gray sky. It wasn't night anymore, not exactly. But it wasn't day either. It was just off. Then I saw it, a twisted overpass overhead. Concrete split open, rusted beams exposed like ribs. I passed beneath it in silence, watching the cracks crawl across its length. 10 minutes later, it appeared again. Same angle, same broken signs, same graffiti, only this time the paint was fresh. I never turned around, but the road had doubled back without asking permission. A loop inside a loop, with no signs to mark the difference. A third time, I passed under it again. No doubt now. The same sharp bend before, the same rattle from the driver's side window as wind slipped through some unseen crack. The world wasn't repeating exactly, but the road had no end anymore. It had let go of logic. I hesitated before glancing at the mirror again. The longer I avoided it, the heavier its presence felt, like a word you can't remember but still feel pressing at the back of your teeth. I reached up and peeled away the hoodie I had draped over it. Slow, reluctant. The thing chasing me was gone. The road behind looked empty again, but not restored. If anything, it had decayed further. The trees were completely black now, like burnt silhouettes. The sky in the reflection pulsed faintly. No stars, just a dense layer of fog that seemed to glow in a deep, sick shade of violet. The road in the mirror didn't have white dividing lines anymore. They had darkened, turned black on black, but they shimmered faintly, blinking every few seconds like dying eyes. I realized they weren't lines at all now. They were cracks. The reflectors blinked too. Not with the bright amber glow I remembered, but with a dull, reddish flicker. Not synchronized. Each blinked in a pattern, erratic and stuttering, like code. Like something trying to speak. Then the phone rang. The screen lit the inside of the car in a blue pulse. Unknown number. No name. No location. I let it ring twice. Curiosity won. I tapped to answer. The speaker filled the car with static and then breathing. Shallow. Uneven. Close. I waited, but the line stayed that way. No voice. No background. Just that rhythmic, ragged sound of someone drawing air in through clenched teeth. Then the GPS woke up. It hadn't made a sound in over an hour, but now it chirped to life with eerie clarity. A new destination had been entered. One I hadn't touched. One I hadn't even noticed loading. Destination in 6 minutes. No address. No coordinates. Just a promise of arrival. My hands tightened on the wheel. The air in the cabin felt heavier. The kind of pressure you feel right before a thunderstorm, when the sky folds in on itself and time seems to stall. That's when the weight shifted. The car began to drag, as if towing something. The accelerator still responded, but the body of the vehicle felt denser, like gravity had thickened only beneath the frame. The engine whined. The steering wheel resisted small turns. It was as if something had settled into the car with me. I glanced at the back seat. Empty. The leather was undisturbed. The seatbelt still neatly folded, but the sense of occupancy was impossible to ignore. A presence, like heat left behind on fabric, like the scent of someone who'd been there long enough to belong. I reached for the rear view again. This time, I tore it from the windshield. The adhesive gave with a sharp snap, and I threw the mirror out the window in one fluid motion. It spun, flashing once in the air like a coin, then hit the pavement with a hollow crack. I didn't watch it land, but seconds later it was back, not stuck to the glass, just resting on the dashboard, right where it had been before, perfectly aligned, undamaged. I stared at it, my mind unwilling to bridge the gap between what should be and what was. It hadn't rolled in, hadn't bounced. It simply was there again, like it had never left. I looked. The road in the mirror was breaking. Fissures snaked across the pavement like lightning frozen mid-strike. They glowed from within, an ugly, shifting light that wasn't fire and wasn't natural. A kind of pulse that moved like breath held too long and finally exhaled. The cracks weren't random. They spread from a single point in the distance, radiating outward like veins, like roots, like a net. And from underneath, something glowed. Not yellow, not red, something colder, deeper, a color that didn't belong to any spectrum. It made my stomach twist just looking at it. The light bled through the cracks, growing brighter as if something was pressing up from underneath the asphalt, trying to break through, trying to become. The road ahead remained intact, but only barely. Every mile I gained felt borrowed. Every second I stayed ahead of whatever was unfolding behind me felt stolen. The mirror had stopped reflecting. Now it warned. The car began to die in pieces. First came the dashboard. The glow from the speedometer dimmed, flickered, then went black entirely. I pressed the gas and felt the car respond, but I had no way of knowing how fast I was moving. The dials had turned to darkness. The engine noise felt disconnected, hollow, like I was no longer inside a machine, but riding in something gutted and reanimated. Then the lights began to fail. The beams that had pierced through the gray for hours began to flutter like candle flames caught in wind. Not off, not on, just weak, like they were blinking against something they couldn't quite see. The road ahead dissolved into shadow, only appearing in quick bursts of clarity between flickers. I was blind, still moving, still surrounded by a world I couldn't trust and couldn't see. The mirror on the dash buzzed faintly, vibrating as if humming through some internal current. I didn't look at it this time. I didn't need to. Panic clawed at my chest. It wasn't a frantic kind. It was the dull, hopeless variety, the realization that there were no choices left, only inevitabilities. When the exit appeared, I took it. I didn't recognize it. A sharp turn to the right. No sign, no warning, no dump. Just a break in the barrier and a soft curve lit faintly by the dying beams of the headlights. The road peeled away from the highway like a scar, and I followed without thinking, without slowing. The mirror reacted immediately. It didn't reflect the new road. It showed flashes, quick, jarring cuts between impossible scenes. A forest engulfed in blue flame, burning backward into itself. A stretch of highway suspended midair, looping endlessly over an abyss without beginning or end. A small room filled with mirrors instead of walls, each reflection slightly out of sync with the next, as though time was unraveling between them. Then silence. The flickering stopped. The road beneath me smoothed, like newly poured asphalt. The sky above brightened slightly, gray giving way to a dusty, early morning hue. The trees straightened. The shoulder widened. The world looked normal, but it wasn't. I eased my foot toward the brake, pressed it gently, half expecting nothing, and got worse. The pedals sank to the floor with no resistance. No pressure. No response. The wheels kept turning. The car coasted forward, speed unchecked, as if the brakes had never existed at all. I hit it again, harder this time. Nothing. Not even the shudder of locked tires. Just an empty pedal and a machine determined to keep going. The GPS, long silent, crackled to life. Its voice came calm, distorted by static but unmistakable in tone. The screen pulsed once, and a final message appeared. You have arrived. The headlights snapped to full brightness. Ahead of me, the road ended. Not in a ditch, not in a turn, in a wall. A towering barrier of mirrored glass stretched across the path like a monolith. No seams, no warning signs, just pure, polished reflection, impossibly tall and wide, as if it had been grown rather than built. The car slowed, on its own, and rolled to a stop inches from it. I hadn't touched the brake. The reflection inside the glass was perfect but wrong. My car sat idle. The road behind it stretched out into a hazy horizon. But the driver's seat was empty. No outline, no silhouette, just vacancy. A vehicle with no one behind the wheel. I looked to the rear view. It shattered. No impact, no warning. Just a sudden, dry snap and a web of cracks spidering out across its face like veins. Tiny shards began to fall, slow-motion fragments of the world I'd left behind, catching the last flickers of dashboard light as they scattered across the console. The engine went quiet. It didn't sputter. It didn't choke. It simply stopped, like someone had cut the cord between life and movement. The hum of electricity faded. The dashboard blacked out. Even the glow from the GPS flickered and died. I sat in silence. No wind, no insects, no road noise, no motion from the trees. It was a silence so deep it felt engineered, a vacuum that had devoured all other sound. I rolled down the window on instinct. Not even air moved beyond it. Behind me, there was nothing, not just the absence of cars or light. The rear view was gone, and with it, any sense that a world still existed in that direction. It didn't feel like something was following me anymore. It felt like the idea of behind had been erased entirely. There was only forward, only the road ahead, only the wall of glass, and somewhere behind that mirrored surface, a version of me that had already stepped out of this place, or maybe never entered it at all. And even though everything was still now, utterly, deathly still, I felt it. That subtle, steady pressure. The sensation I'd felt miles ago. Gaining. Always gaining. It hadn't stopped. It had simply gotten close enough that I couldn't see it anymore.